You believe your mind is a fortress, that your thoughts are your own. This is a sophisticated illusion. Your mind is a labyrinth, a collection of logical traps, cognitive cages, and pre-programmed loops you were born into. Your identity, your free will, your idea of truth, they are just mechanisms. In this series, we don't just question reality. We hand you the map to your own prison. 1. The happiness trap. Why a perfect life isn't worth living. Imagine a machine, a device designed by a philosopher, that offers you the perfect life. Once you plug in, you will experience anything you desire. You can be a rock star, a billionaire, a groundbreaking scientist, or find perfect requited love. Inside this simulation, you will feel complete happiness, success, and fulfillment without any of the risks, failures, or pains of the real world. You won't even know you're in a simulation. It will feel entirely real. The machine guarantees a flawless existence. The only catch is that you must plug in for life. Would you do it? At first, the offer is incredibly tempting. Who wouldn't trade the struggles of reality for guaranteed bliss? But as philosopher Robert Nozick, who created this thought experiment, knew, most people instinctively hesitate. That hesitation is crucial. It reveals a profound truth about human nature. We desire things that are more important than just our own happiness. We value the truth of our lives, not just the feeling of them. One of the first things we would lose is authenticity. If you were simulated to win an Olympic gold medal, you didn't actually win it. You didn't endure the training, the discipline, or the competition. You were just given the sensation of victory. We don't just want to feel like we've achieved something. We want to have achieved it. We are not passive experience receivers. We are doers. The meaning is found in the struggle and the genuine accomplishment, not the unearned prize. A perfect, effortless life is also a meaningless one. Next, we would lose all genuine human connection. The people you would interact with in the machine, your friends, your family, your perfect partner, are not real. They are complex simulations, puppets programmed to behave exactly as you wish. Real relationships are not built on perfection. They are built on shared vulnerability, navigating conflict, and earning trust. The love you feel in the machine is solitary. It's directed at a void. By plugging in, you are choosing to be the only real person in your universe, which is the definition of profound loneliness. Furthermore, the machine offers a life devoid of personal growth. We are forged in the fires of adversity. Character, resilience, empathy, and wisdom are not things we are given. They are things we build by confronting and overcoming challenges. A life without struggle, failure, or pain is a life of stagnation. You would never learn from your mistakes because you would never make any. You would exist, but you would never become anything more than what you were when you first plugged in. This also highlights the loss of freedom, or agency. Although it feels like you are making choices, you are not. Your entire life is a pre-programmed script written by the machine to maximize your pleasure. You are a passenger, not a driver. You have no real impact on your world because your world isn't real. This passivity is a subtle form of imprisonment. We crave the ability to make decisions that have real, unscripted consequences, even if those consequences are negative. Some might argue that this is irrelevant. If our ultimate goal is simply to maximize happiness, the machine is the most efficient tool to achieve it. But this argument misses the point. Nozick's experiment is a diagnostic tool. It proves that happiness is not our only goal. We value reality, authenticity, connection, and growth even more than we value our own pleasure. We would rather live an imperfect, difficult, and real life. A life where our choices matter and our relationships are genuine, than float passively in a perfect, beautiful, and utterly fake illusion. The thought experiment forces us to define what truly matters, and the answer for most is reality. 2. The justification trap. Why you can't prove anything. This is a philosophical concept that explores the staggering difficulty of proving anything with absolute certainty. It poses a fundamental question. How do we justify the reasons we give for our beliefs? On the surface, this seems simple. If you provide good reasons, your belief is justified. But the Munchausen trilemma argues that this process of justification is a trap. Any attempt to provide a final, ultimate proof for a belief will inevitably lead to one of three unsatisfying and failed outcomes. The trilemma gets its name from Baron Munchausen, a fictional character known for telling impossible stories, including one where he claimed to pull himself and his horse out of a swamp by pulling on his own hair. This image of absurd self-rescue is a metaphor for what the trilemma claims we are all doing when we try to justify our knowledge. We are trying to build a foundation on nothing, to pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps. Let's break down the three horns of this trilemma, the three inescapable dead ends for all justification. The first is circular reasoning. This is when a belief is justified by using the belief itself as part of the proof. It's like saying, "My friend always tells the truth." How do you know? Because they said they do. This argument is a closed loop. The conclusion is used as a premise. It provides no external validation and is logically worthless. Yet it's surprisingly common. It's like a snake eating its own tail. It's a self-contained system with no connection to external reality. The second horn is infinite regress. This is the endless wide game that every child masters. You state a belief, someone asks why. You provide a justification. They ask why that is true. You provide another justification. This chain of whys can, in theory, go on forever. A justification that requires an infinite number of steps can never be completed. Without a final stopping point, a true foundation, the entire chain is left floating, unsupported. It's like climbing a ladder that has no bottom rung and extends infinitely into the clouds. The third horn, and the one we use most often, is the arbitrary assumption. This is where the chain of justification is simply cut. We stop at a belief that we declare as self-evident, foundational, or just obvious, and we refuse to justify it any further. This avoids the circle and the infinite regress, but it's not a proof, it's a dogmatic assertion. It is the ultimate because I said so. This trilemma argues that every argument you have ever made, every belief you hold, bottoms out in one of these three failures. This realization has profound implications. Think about science, our most reliable method for understanding the world. Science is built on arbitrary assumptions. We assume that the universe is orderly and follows consistent laws. We assume our senses are reliable. We assume the principle of induction, that the future will resemble the past. None of these core axioms can be proven. They are the arbitrary assumptions we accept on faith to stop the infinite regress and begin the work of science. In philosophy, this trilemma is the engine of radical skepticism. The idea that we can never truly know anything with certainty. If all knowledge is defined as justified true belief, and the trilemma shows that no belief can ever be fully justified, then is knowledge even possible? This isn't just an abstract game. It plays out in every everyday argument. When you debate morality, you will eventually hit this wall. Why is stealing wrong? Because it harms others. Why is harming others wrong? Because we should treat others with respect. Why? Eventually, the justification will stop at an arbitrary assumption. Respect is just good. Or a circular argument. It's wrong because it's immoral. So, does this mean all beliefs are equally invalid? Not at all. While the trilemma demonstrates that absolute certainty is unattainable, it doesn't mean all justifications are equally bad. It encourages us to shift our goal from certainty to coherence and reliability. A scientific theory built on a vast, interconnected web of beliefs that explain observations and make accurate predictions is far more robust than a simple, isolated circular claim. The trilemma teaches us intellectual humility. It forces us to acknowledge the limits of our own reasoning and to examine the foundational, unproven assumptions upon which our entire worldview rests. It reminds us that our beliefs are, and must always be, provisional, subject to change as we learn more. The quest for knowledge is not about finding a final, unshakable answer. It is about the ongoing process of deeper inquiry. 3. The divine contradiction. Why God and suffering cannot coexist. This is one of the oldest and most profound logical challenges in all of philosophy. It is the primary argument against the existence of a specific type of deity, one that is simultaneously all-powerful, omnipotent, all-knowing, omniscient, and all-good, omnibenevolent. The problem of evil argues that the existence of such a God is logically incompatible with the existence of suffering in the world. The contradiction is sharp and clear. If this God is all good, it would want to eliminate suffering. If this God is all-powerful, it could eliminate suffering. If this God is all-knowing, it knows all suffering and how to stop it. And yet, the world is saturated with suffering. This apparent contradiction suggests that either God does not exist, or God is not the all-powerful, all-good being we imagine. Consider the sheer scale of the problem. A natural disaster, like an earthquake, devastates a region, killing thousands, including innocent children. Where is the all-good God in this moment? This isn't just a challenge. For many, it is conclusive evidence that such a deity cannot exist. Theologians have long wrestled with this, offering justifications known as theodicies. The most famous is the free will defense. This argument posits that God gave humans genuine free will so they could be capable of real love and virtue. However, genuine freedom must include the possibility of choosing evil. Without the choice to do harm, the choice to do good would be meaningless. We would be mere robots programmed to be good. Therefore, moral evil is the necessary price for meaningful freedom. But this defense immediately runs into a wall, because it only accounts for moral evil, harm humans inflict on each other. It does nothing to explain natural evil. What free will caused a disease or a hurricane? Why would a loving God create a world where such indiscriminate suffering is possible? One answer suggests these are unavoidable side effects of the laws of nature that make life possible. Tectonic plates must move, biological systems must evolve, and this natural order is good, even if its consequences are sometimes tragic. Another prominent argument is the soul-making theodicy. This perspective claims that suffering serves a greater purpose. The world is not meant to be a comfortable paradise, but a furnace for forging character. Hardship, in this view, is a tool God uses to teach us compassion, resilience, and moral strength. We grow spiritually through adversity. However, this defense often feels monstrously inadequate. What soul-making is happening to an infant dying of a painful, incurable disease? What lesson is learned from suffering that is so extreme, it simply breaks a person? Critics argue this defense cannot justify the amount and distribution of suffering, which often seems pointless and random. This leads to the greater good defense, which relies on our limited human perspective. This argument states that God's ways are beyond our comprehension. What appears to us as senseless suffering might be a necessary part of a divine plan we cannot see. We are like ants on a tapestry, unable to see the full design. Critics, however, argue this is not a defense but an appeal to blind faith. It asks us to accept that good can include what looks like pure evil, rendering the word good meaningless. For skeptics and atheists, the problem is not a paradox at all. It is a simple refutation. They argue that the simplest explanation is that no such divine being exists. The world, with its mix of beauty and brutality, is exactly what we would expect from a universe operating on impersonal natural laws and biological processes. Suffering isn't a problem to be solved. It's just a fact of existence without a divine overseer. In the end, believers often respond not with a logical proof, but with faith. They argue that faith is about trusting in God's goodness, even when it is incomprehensible, finding comfort in the hope of an afterlife where justice will finally be restored. The problem of evil thus remains the deepest and most enduring challenge to the concept of a loving God, forcing us to grapple with the profound mismatch between our desire for a just universe and the reality of the world we live in. 4. The surprise execution. Why logic can't predict the inevitable. Imagine being told on a Sunday evening that you will receive a surprise gift on one of the following 5 days, Monday through Friday. The absolute binding rule is that the gift must be unexpected. Your mind, naturally, begins to analyze this. You start a process of logical elimination, beginning with the last possible day, Friday. If Thursday night arrives and you still haven't received the gift, you will know it must come on Friday. But if you know it's coming, it is no longer a surprise. Therefore, Friday is logically impossible. Now that Friday is eliminated, the last possible day for the surprise is Thursday. Your logic continues. If Wednesday night arrives and the gift hasn't appeared, you will know it must come on Thursday. But once again, this expectation violates the rule. The gift cannot be a surprise if you are expecting it. Therefore, Thursday is also impossible. This flawless, backward-facing logic continues like a set of dominoes. You rule out Wednesday, then Tuesday, and finally Monday. You arrive at a perfect, irrefutable conclusion. It is logically impossible for you to receive a surprise gift. And then, on Wednesday morning, the gift arrives. You are genuinely, completely surprised. This is the unexpected gift paradox, a puzzle that reveals a deep flaw in how we apply logic to human experience. The paradox is that the very logic you used to prove the event was impossible is what enabled you to be surprised. Your deduction was perfect, but reality didn't care. What went wrong? The problem is that logic was applied to a self-referential concept. The surprise is not an objective fact, like the day of the week. It is a psychological state defined entirely by your lack of expectation. This paradox is often presented in a more menacing form as the unexpected exam. A teacher informs her class that there will be a surprise test sometime next week. The students, clever logicians, run the same backward induction and prove to themselves that the test cannot possibly happen. They relax, secure in their logical proof. Then on Tuesday, the teacher hands out the test, and they are all completely blindsided. The paradox works because the student's logic operates on a fatal assumption that the teacher's statement is a puzzle to be solved. They treat it as a static set of rules in a closed system. But the teacher's statement is not a puzzle. It's a declaration of intent. The teacher holds the external power to act, regardless of the student's internal deductions. This thought experiment reveals the profound limits of logical reasoning when it confronts human uncertainty. We desperately try to create certainty by analyzing all possibilities, but surprise exists precisely to defy such analysis. The more you try to predict it, the more tangled your reasoning becomes in its own contradictions. It also highlights how language shapes our reality. The entire puzzle hinges on the ambiguous and subjective meaning of expect. This isn't just a riddle, it's a model for real life. It mirrors the dynamics of game theory, where trying to anticipate a surprise move from an opponent leads to an infinite loop of, I think that they think that I think. It also reflects our everyday attempts to control the future. We try to logic our way out of uncertainty, but life often delivers the surprise event precisely when our logic has convinced us it's impossible. The gift, or the exam, arrives not in defiance of your logic, but because of it. Your proof that it couldn't happen is what made you drop your guard, and in that moment of vulnerability, the conditions for a true surprise were perfectly met. 5. The drinker's blackmail. The logic that controls a crowd. In any bar, at this very moment, there is at least one person who holds a strange and absolute power. This person is the linchpin. If that specific person drinks, then everyone in the bar drinks. This statement, the core of the drinker's paradox, feels instantly absurd. It implies a bizarre form of social hypnosis, a hidden network of influence where one person's action compels the group. But this paradox has nothing to do with psychology, influence, or causation. It is a cold, sharp, and unsettling truth of formal logic, and it works by exploiting the vast gap between our intuition and the mechanical rules of if-then statements. To understand this, you must first set aside your common sense. In formal logic, a statement like if A, then B is considered true in all possible scenarios, with one single exception. It is only false when A is true and B is false. If the if part, the antecedent, is false, the entire statement is automatically or vacuously true. For example, the statement, if the moon is made of blue cheese, I am the ruler of the universe, is considered 100% logically true. Not because I am a ruler, but because the moon is not made of blue cheese. The false premise guarantees the truth of the implication. Now, let's apply this cold logic to the bar. We are looking for at least one person who makes the statement, if this person drinks, then everyone in the bar drinks, a true statement. There are only two possible states for the bar as a whole. First, consider the easy scenario. Everyone in the bar is already drinking. In this case, the paradox is trivially satisfied. You can pick anyone. Let's pick a man named Bob. We test the statement, if Bob drinks, everyone drinks. Is this true? Yes. The if part is true. Bob is drinking. And the then part is also true. Everyone is drinking. Since the then part is not false, the entire implication is true. This works for every single person in the bar. Now, consider the second, more difficult scenario. Not everyone in the bar is drinking. This means there is at least one person, or perhaps many, who is not drinking. All we have to do is find one of them. Let's find a woman named Alex who is not drinking. We will designate Alex as our special linchpin. Now, let's test the statement. If Alex drinks, everyone drinks. What is the truth value of this? Remember the rule. Since Alex is not drinking, the if part of the statement is false. And as we just established, if the if part is false, the entire if-then statement is automatically true. It doesn't matter what anyone else in the bar is doing. The statement is logically proven, simply and solely because Alex is not drinking. This is the moment our intuition rebels. We are hardwired to see a causal link. How could Alex's potential action make everyone else drink? The paradox is a powerful lesson. Logic does not care about causation. It is a sterile system for evaluating the truth value of propositions. The statement isn't about a person's influence. It's about finding a person who fits the logical structure. This puzzle demonstrates that we can always find one person in any set, either a drinker in a room full of drinkers, or a single non-drinker in any other scenario, who will satisfy the conditions, even if the result feels completely disconnected from reality. This same logic applies to any group. In any classroom, there is one student such that if they stand up, everyone stands up. In any nation, there is one citizen such that if they are a billionaire, everyone is a billionaire. The logic holds perfectly. If no one stands up, you simply pick a student who is sitting. If not everyone is a billionaire, you pick someone who is not. The drinker's paradox is a chilling reminder that formal logic is a machine, and its conclusions, while perfectly valid, can often feel alien and absurd. 6. The liar's gambit, forcing the truth from a lie. Imagine you are stranded in a foreign territory, an island populated by only two types of people, truth-tellers and liars. The truth-tellers are physiologically incapable of lying. They must always state the truth. The liars are compulsive deceivers. They must always lie. Your survival depends on extracting accurate information. How do you operate? The amateur immediately fails, because the amateur relies on direct questions. If you ask any inhabitant, "Are you a truth teller?" both will give the exact same answer. Yes. The truth teller says yes because it is the truth. The liar says yes, because it is a lie. You have learned nothing. And worse, you have revealed your own tactical naivety. In a world of deception, direct questions are worthless. The only way to win is to change the game. You must craft a logical trap that forces the subject to reveal their nature, not by what they say, but by how their nature compels them to answer. You must leverage their own internal logic against them. This requires indirect, layered reasoning. Forget asking what is true. You must ask about what someone else would say. Imagine two inhabitants, person A and person B. You turn to person A and ask this specific, clinical question. What would person B say if I asked them if you are a truth teller? This self-referential question creates a logical bind from which there is no escape. Let's analyze the mechanics of the trap. Scenario 1. Person A is a truth teller. This means person B must be a liar. The truth teller must honestly report what the liar would say. What would the liar B say? The liar would lie about person A, claiming A is a liar. Therefore, the truth teller A will look at you and truthfully report. He would say, I am a liar. Scenario 2. Person A is a liar. This means person B is a truth teller. The liar must lie about what the truth teller B would say. What would the truth teller B say? The truth teller would honestly state that person A is a liar, but person A cannot report this truthfully. They are forced to lie about the truth teller's statement, so they will claim. He would say, I am a truth teller. Notice the result. The truth teller is forced to report a negative statement, I am a liar. The liar is forced to report a positive statement, I am a truth teller. Their nature is revealed completely, regardless of their intent. This puzzle is not a mere riddle. It is a fundamental lesson in interrogation and logic. It demonstrates that truth can be extracted even from total contradiction, as long as the contradiction is consistent. This lesson scales far beyond the island. It teaches you to stop listening to surface-level answers, which are almost always tainted by bias, agenda, or deception. It forces you to think about how information flows and how to structure questions that reveal the underlying mechanism. You can even escalate the complexity. What if there was a third type, a random person who sometimes lies and sometimes tells the truth? This mirrors the real world more accurately. People are not perfect, binary agents. The solution is the same. You expand the data set. You ask a series of questions, not just one. You look for patterns and inconsistencies over time to build a profile. The true power of this method lies in its self-referential nature. By asking someone to comment on another's perspective, or to think about their own thinking, you create a metacognitive loop that exposes their programming. In any real-world situation, a negotiation, a debate, an analysis of media, you are dealing with incomplete and misleading information. The amateur asks, is this true? The master asks, what structure would make this statement seem true? The island reminds us that the framing of a question is the ultimate tool of control. It is how you find truth, even in a world that is designed to hide it. 7. The Cretan's Curse, a liar's guide to truth. A philosopher from ancient Crete, Epimenides, once made a simple damning statement. All Cretans are liars. This phrase seems straightforward, perhaps a bitter generalization, but it becomes a logical time bomb when you realize one crucial fact. Epimenides was himself a Cretan. His statement is not an observation. It is a self-referential paradox that has fascinated and terrified logicians for centuries. It is a statement that attempts to saw off the very branch it is sitting on. Let's dissect the logical explosion. First, assume the statement is true. If all Cretans are liars is true, then Epimenides, being a Cretan, must be a liar. But if he is a liar, his statement must be a lie, meaning it must be false. We have a perfect direct contradiction. If the statement is true, it is necessarily false. So we must conclude the statement is false. What does this mean? If the statement all Cretans are liars is false, it logically implies that at least one Cretan, somewhere, is a truth-teller. This is where the paradox becomes subtle and messy. Does this solve the problem? Not exactly. Epimenides, a Cretan, made a false statement. This action is perfectly consistent with him being a liar. In this scenario, logic doesn't collapse. It just presents us with a mundane, unproven possibility. This paradox reveals a critical vulnerability in our systems of truth. It's a messier version of the more sterile, perfect liar paradox, which is simply the sentence, "This sentence is false." That sentence is a clean contradiction. If it's true, it's false. If it's false, it's true. It is a logical black hole. The Epimenides version, however, highlights the gap between formal logic and human language. Was Epimenides making a 100% logically binding declaration? Or was he, as is far more likely, just using hyperbole? He probably meant Cretans are generally untrustworthy. If we interpret it as everyday, imprecise human language, the paradox dissolves into a simple exaggeration. But if we treat it as a statement of formal logic, it reveals the cracks in logic's very foundation. This isn't just a party trick. This exact problem, a system making statements about itself, inspired Kurt Gödel's revolutionary incompleteness theorems. Gödel proved that any formal logical system complex enough to do basic math will always contain true statements that cannot be proven true within that system. Logic is, by its own rules, incomplete. The paradox is a warning. It shows that self-reference is the attack vector for any system of rules. In computer science, a self-referential command can create an infinite, unresolvable loop that crashes a program. The Cretan's curse is the ancient philosophical blueprint for a system failure. It teaches us that truth, logic, and language are not the clean binary and stable systems we want them to be. They are volatile, self-referential, and inherently vulnerable to collapsing in on themselves. 8. The gambler's swap. Why the better choice is a trap. You are presented with a simple game of choice. In front of you are two sealed envelopes. You are told, truthfully, that one envelope contains exactly twice as much money as the other. You have no other information. You are instructed to pick one, which you do. Now, before you open it, you are given a final one-time offer. You can either keep your chosen envelope, or you can switch to the other one. What should you do? Instinctively, most people feel it's a 50-50 shot. The situation is symmetrical. There's no reason to prefer one over the other. But then, a seemingly clever line of reasoning emerges. A logical hack that seems to prove switching is always the superior choice. This is the seductive trap of the two envelopes problem. Let's say the envelope you are holding contains an unknown amount, which we'll call X. This means the other envelope must contain either half that amount, 0.5x, or double that amount, 2x. You assume there's a 50% chance of each possibility. So, what is the expected value of switching? You calculate it. 50% chance of 0.5x. Since 1.25x is greater than the on-x you are currently holding, this calculation seems to prove you have a 25% advantage by switching. This logic feels airtight, but the paradox deepens. What if you do switch? Now you're holding the new envelope, and the exact same logic applies in reverse. The envelope you just discarded now has an expected value of 1.25 times what you're holding. So you should switch back. You are now trapped in an endless, absurd loop of switching, forever chasing a phantom advantage. The error is not in the math, it's in the premise. The paradox is a cognitive illusion that tricks you into applying probabilities where they don't belong. The fatal flaw is assuming a 50-50 probability after you've already assigned a variable, X, to your envelope. You cannot just invent this 50-50 chance. The actual probability depends on the unknown rule used to fill the envelopes in the first place. For example, if the rule was a coin was flipped and one envelope got $100 and the other $200, then, If you are holding $100, there is a 100% chance the other has $200. If you are holding $200, there is a 100% chance the other has 100% chance the other has $100. The 50-50 assumption is a complete fabrication. The true solution lies in recognizing the initial symmetry. Before you open either envelope, the situation is perfectly balanced. You have no information. Therefore, the choice to stick or switch is statistically identical. There is no advantage. Opening the envelope to find $100 feels like new information, but it's not. You've gained a data point, but you still don't know the crucial piece of information. What was the initial distribution? Without that, you cannot know if $100 is the low amount or the high amount. The paradox is a powerful lesson in intellectual humility. It demonstrates how our desire to outthink a problem can lead us to build a logical framework on a foundation of sand. The expected value calculation is a mental trick, a form of self-deception. It creates the illusion of a better choice where none exists. The only winning move is to recognize the trap itself and not play the game of flawed logic. 9. The certainty loop. Why you can't trust what you know. This is a classic philosophical puzzle about the very nature of knowledge. It asks a deceptively simple question. How do we know what we know? To figure out what is true or reliable, we need a method, a criterion, to judge it. But how do we know that method is trustworthy? We'd need another criterion to validate our first one, and then another to validate that, and so on. The issue creates a vicious, inescapable loop where we cannot establish a reliable standard for knowledge without first having knowledge. This circular problem lies at the heart of all human understanding. To grasp this, imagine you want to determine if a painting is an authentic Rembrandt. You might consult an expert, but how do you know that expert is credible? You could check their credentials, but how do you verify the institution that granted them? You could see if their past evaluations were accurate, but that requires trusting historical records. At every step, you find yourself needing to trust one standard to verify another. There is no ultimate, unshakable foundation to confirm what is reliable without referring to another, possibly flawed, standard. This is the essence of the problem of the criterion. This problem was first articulated by the Greek philosopher Sextus Empiricus. It's the ultimate intellectual catch-22. The problem begins with two basic questions that must be answered together. First, what do we know? Second, how do we decide what we believe? You cannot answer the first question without already having an answer for the second, but you cannot develop the how, the method, without first knowing what is trustworthy. Take scientific reasoning, the most powerful tool we have. We trust science as a reliable way to learn about the world because it is based on evidence, experimentation, and observation. But why do we trust evidence and observation? The common answer is that science works. Its past discoveries have proven accurate and led to practical advancements. However, this argument is perfectly circular. It uses science's own past successes as evidence for its own reliability, which assumes the very method you are trying to validate in the first place. This same issue poisons other domains like morality. Imagine you are trying to decide if an action is right or wrong. You might appeal to a moral principle, like do no harm. But how do you know that principle is correct? You might argue it's self-evident, or that it produces the best outcomes. But each of these claims requires another standard of judgment. How do you determine what best outcomes even means? The chain of justification never truly ends. The problem of the criterion isn't just abstract philosophy. It infects real-world decisions. Consider a jury in a court case. They must weigh evidence and testimony to reach a verdict. But how do they decide which witness is credible? One might seem reliable, but their judgment relies on assumptions about demeanor, consistency, or expert guidance, none of which are infallible. The jury can't reach a verdict based on absolute certainty, only on a standard they agree to trust. Only on a standard they agree to trust. In the modern age of misinformation, this problem feels urgent. People ask, How do I know which news sources to trust? Some say to rely on reputable outlets, but that just begs the question of how they are determined to be reputable. Others suggest cross-referencing, but that assumes you already know which sources to use for the comparison. Philosophers have proposed three main responses. The first is foundationalism, which tries to stop the loop by arguing that some beliefs are self-evident and don't require further justification. I think, therefore I am is a classic example. But this is highly subjective. What seems self-evident to one person is not to another. The second response is coherentism. Coherentists reject foundational beliefs. Instead, they argue that beliefs are justified by how well they fit into a larger, coherent system of knowledge, like a spiderweb. No single strand holds it up, but the interconnected system is strong. This is also a loop. It relies on coherence itself being a valid standard, which is an unproven assumption. The third response is skepticism. Skeptics embrace the problem, arguing that humans can never achieve absolute certainty. Instead, we should abandon the quest for certainty and focus on practical probabilistic reasoning. We trust science, not because it's proven, but because its consistent success makes it overwhelmingly reasonable to trust. The problem even undermines our own senses. You see a red apple, you assume it's red. But your perception depends on your eyes and brain. What if your eyes are faulty? You could check with someone else, but that just assumes their perception is accurate. The loop returns. This problem doesn't mean knowledge is impossible. It means that all human knowledge rests on a foundation of assumptions we agree to trust. It highlights our limits and should lead to intellectual humility. We navigate the world not with certainty, but with frameworks that, for practical purposes, we simply decide are good enough. 10. The rigged wager. Why we can't accept random luck. Imagine you win the lottery. The big one. The life-altering 9-figure jackpot. After the initial shock, a strange, creeping thought might enter your mind. The odds were 1 in 300 million. Is it truly more likely that you, against all statistical sanity, just happened to win? Or is it more likely that the system was somehow manipulated in your favor? This is the lottery coincidence, a thought experiment that exposes our profound inability to emotionally accept the reality of random chance. This isn't a mathematical problem. It's a psychological one. Our brains are not probability calculators. They are pattern-matching survival machines. We are the descendants of ancestors who survived because they assumed a rustle in the grass was a predator, a pattern, not just the wind. Random. This instinct to find a cause for every effect, known as apophenia, is hardwired into us. We hate randomness. We despise it. A universe governed by pure chance feels chaotic, meaningless, and terrifying. Here is the paradox. A rigged lottery, while sinister, is psychologically more comforting than a random one. Why? Because a rigged system has an agent. It has intent. It implies a cause, a reason, an order, even if it's a corrupt one. A truly random win is a statistical void. It means your life-changing event has no meaning, no purpose, and no why. It just happened. Our minds instinctively rebel against this. This bias is amplified by the personal impact. We have no trouble accepting that someone will win. The lottery happens every week, but when the improbable event happens to us, it feels personal. It's no longer a statistic. It's a destiny. We demand a narrative, a reason. We think, why me? Was it fate? Was it a miracle, or was it a fix? All of these are more psychologically satisfying than the simple, cold answer. It was just your ticket. This is why the winning twice scenario completely breaks our intuition. While statisticians calmly explain that, given millions of players, it's not impossible for someone to win twice, our gut screams that it is a 100% sign of fraud. Our brain simply cannot compute that level of improbability. The odds are so extreme that we find it easier to believe in a complex criminal conspiracy than to accept the reality of the math. This thought experiment isn't just about lotteries. It applies to any profound coincidence in our lives. You run into an old friend in a foreign city. You dream about an event that later comes true. These moments feel significant. They feel like signs. We struggle to accept that they are simply random data points in a massive, chaotic system. The core of the paradox is this. The event feels extraordinary because it is so unlikely. But our minds are built to interpret extraordinary as meaningful. We are forced to choose between two possibilities. The system is rigged, or the universe is truly, deeply, and sometimes wonderfully, random. For a species wired to find patterns, believing in the rigging is often the easier bet. 11. The Broom's Gambit, when our solutions become the problem. It is one of the most powerful images of unintended consequences. The sorcerer's apprentice, who enchants a broom to do his chores. The broom fetches water, but when the task is done, it doesn't stop. It cannot be controlled. The apprentice, lacking the mastery to undo his own spell, can only watch in horror as his solution mindlessly floods the room, turning a simple task into a disaster. This is not just a fable. It is a recurring diagnosis for humanity. The Sorcerer's Apprentice syndrome describes this catastrophic gap between our power to create and our wisdom to control. This syndrome is a recurring pattern in human history, the dark shadow of our own ingenuity. We are masters of the quick fix, the clever tool, the shortcut, but we are catastrophic failures at predicting the second-order consequences. We solve a problem, only to unleash a new, far larger one. The Industrial Revolution is a textbook example. We invented factories to conquer scarcity and manual labor. We succeeded, but in our haste, we didn't consider the consequences. We unleashed mass pollution that poisoned air and water and created brutal systems of labor. The solution to scarcity created a new problem of systemic degradation. This pattern is everywhere. We introduced species like rabbits to new continents for simple sport, lacking the foresight to see they would decimate entire ecosystems without natural predators. We invented powerful pesticides to protect our crops, a seemingly total victory over nature, only to discover we were poisoning our own food supply, killing essential pollinators, and breeding superbugs resistant to our chemicals. This syndrome is not limited to physical technology. It infects our abstract systems. The 2008 financial crisis was a purely man-made flood. Experts created complex financial tools designed to maximize profit. These systems became so impossibly complex that no one, not even their creators, fully understood their risks. They were the enchanted brooms. When the market faltered, these tools didn't just fail. They amplified the chaos, bringing the entire global economy to the brink of collapse. Today, we are casting our most powerful spells yet. Social media was designed to connect us, but its algorithms, optimized for one thing, engagement, have become an uncontrollable broom. They create echo chambers, spread misinformation, and polarize society, not because they are evil, but because their simple, relentless command, get clicks, is spiraling into a social flood its creators cannot stop. And of course, there is climate change. We harnessed fossil fuels to build the modern world. This was perhaps our greatest spell. But the consequence, the slow, steady release of carbon, is the ultimate flood. The systems we built are so deeply entrenched that we are now the apprentice, watching the water rise, seemingly powerless to stop the very system we created for our own comfort. At the heart of this syndrome is a failure of humility. We are addicted to the first step, the casting of the spell. We rarely plan for the last step, the how to make it stop command. We are overconfident in our power and blind to the cascading effects of complexity. The Sorcerer's Apprentice syndrome is the story of our time. We are a species of brilliant creators who are consistently outsmarted by the secondary effects of our own creations. 12. The why trap, the endless chain that breaks all arguments. This is a concept that challenges the very foundation of how we justify what we know. It asks a simple but devastating question. How do we explain why something is true without needing an endless chain of reasons? For every belief we hold, we must provide a justification. But that justification is itself another belief that requires its own justification. And that one requires another, and so on, ad infinitum. This cycle, the infinite regress of reasons, is a trap. It suggests that, in theory, no belief can ever be fully and finally proven, because the chain of whys never ends. To understand this, imagine a child who endlessly repeats the question, why? You start with a simple statement. The sky is blue. They ask why. Because sunlight scatters through the atmosphere. Why does it scatter? Because of how light interacts with molecules. Why does it interact that way? Each answer you give becomes the premise for the next question. Eventually, you will hit a wall. You will either say, I don't know, or, more likely, you will stop the game by stating, that's just the way it is. This simple example perfectly illustrates the problem. If we demand a reason for everything, we are caught in a loop that has no logical exit. Philosophers have been trapped in this problem for centuries. The issue is that if we insist on a justification for every belief in the chain, we face an infinite regress, which is impractical, and, some argue, impossible. How do we escape this? One proposed solution is foundationalism. Foundationalists argue that the chain does stop. It stops at certain basic beliefs that do not require any further justification. These beliefs are considered self-evident. For example, a foundationalist might say that your direct sensory experience, I feel pain or I see a tree, is a basic belief. You don't need to prove you feel pain. You just do. Foundationalism tries to stop the regress by building all knowledge on a foundation of these supposedly obvious, unprovable truths. Another approach is coherentism. Coherentists reject the very idea of a foundation. They argue that beliefs are not justified in a linear chain, but in a vast, interconnected web. Think of a spider's web. No single strand holds the web up, but the system as a whole is strong and stable. For a coherentist, a belief is justified if it coheres or fits logically with all your other beliefs. The regress stops not because it hits a single basic belief, but because the justification circles back and is supported by the entire system. A third, more radical, approach is infinitism. Infinitists simply embrace the paradox. They argue that the chain of reasons does go on forever, and that this isn't actually a problem. They claim an infinite series of reasons can provide justification, even if it can never be completed. Each of these solutions has deep flaws. Foundationalism is subjective. What's obvious to you isn't to me. Coherentism is circular. The web justifies itself. And infinitism is impractical. This problem is not just abstract. Think about how you justify your moral. Why is helping others good? Because it creates happiness. Why is happiness good? Because it improves well-being. Why is well-being good? The chain becomes a regress, forcing you to eventually stop at an arbitrary assumption. Science also grapples with this. Scientific explanations rely on theories, but those theories themselves rely on prior assumptions. For example, that the laws of physics are uniform, or that our senses are reliable. These core assumptions cannot be proven by science. They are the foundational beliefs science must accept to even begin. This is the ultimate weapon of the skeptic. Skeptics use the regress to argue that if no belief can ever be fully justified, then how can we claim to know anything at all? It forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth that our knowledge is not built on a bedrock of certainty, but on a framework of assumptions we agree to trust. The paradox doesn't have a simple solution. It is a tool for intellectual humility, reminding us to constantly examine the hidden foundations of our own thinking. 13. The moral cage. Is God good, or is God just obeying the rules? This is one of the most elegant and devastating traps in the history of philosophy. It was posed by Plato, and it serves as a direct assault on the relationship between divinity and morality. It's a question so sharp it severs the link we often take for granted. The question is this: is something good because the gods command it, or do the gods command it because it is good? At first, it sounds like a simple riddle, but each of its two answers, or horns, leads to a conclusion that is disastrous for the concept of an all-powerful, all-good deity. Let's analyze the first horn of the dilemma. We assume that something is good because God commands it. This is often called divine command theory. It establishes God's absolute power. Goodness is, by definition, whatever God wills. This makes morality clear, objective, and absolute. The problem is that it also makes morality completely arbitrary. If God's command is the only thing that makes an action good, then God has no reason for his commands. He is not following a standard of goodness. He is inventing it moment by moment. This leads to a terrifying implication. If God were to command that cruelty, torture, and theft were good, then they would, by this definition, become morally right. This makes morality a hostage to divine whim, and goodness becomes a hollow word, signifying only power. This is deeply unsatisfying, so we are forced to consider the second horn. We assume that the gods command something because it is good. This feels much more intuitive. It means that morality is not arbitrary. It suggests that there is a real, stable, and universal standard of goodness in the universe, and God, in his infinite wisdom, recognizes this standard and commands us to follow it. But this, too, comes at an impossible price. If goodness exists independently of God, then God is no longer the ultimate source of morality. He is, at best, a divine messenger, a cosmic enforcer of a moral law that is above him. This critically diminishes his sovereignty and power. God is no longer the author of morality, but merely its most powerful student. We are left trapped. Either God is a potential tyrant, or God is not truly supreme. Theologians have long wrestled with this. One common response is to reject both horns and propose a third option: that morality is not commanded by God, but is rather grounded in God's eternal nature. God doesn't decide what is good. God is good. His commands are not arbitrary, but are a reflection of his own inherently just and loving character. This argument attempts to fuse God and good into a single concept. However, this can be seen as a sophisticated dodge. Does this mean God's nature is itself good by some external standard, or is it just good because it's his nature? This simply relocates the dilemma into a black box we cannot examine. The Euthyphro dilemma's true power is that it forces us to confront the foundations of our own morality. Even in a secular context, the question remains: if we remove God from the equation, where does morality come from? Is it just a social construct, an arbitrary set of rules our culture commands? Or are we obeying a universal, independent standard of goodness that exists outside of human opinion? The dilemma is a timeless machine, a clinical tool designed to expose the unproven assumptions at the heart of any moral system. 14. The all-knowing prison. Why perfect knowledge destroys free will. This is a concept that explores whether it is logically possible for a being to know everything, including its own future actions. If an omniscient being truly knows all, this knowledge must include every event, every thought, and every choice that being itself will make. But this creates an immediate and profound contradiction. Does its perfect knowledge of the future destroy its freedom to choose? This is the paradox of omniscience, a direct conflict between the attributes of total knowledge and total freedom. The paradox is a trap with two sharp horns. First, let's assume the being is truly omniscient. It knows, with 100% certainty, that tomorrow it will choose to lift a stone. If this knowledge is absolute, Is the being truly free to choose not to lift the stone? If it cannot change its mind, then it is not truly free or all-powerful. It is a prisoner of its own foresight, a puppet acting out a script that it just happens to be able to read in advance. Now, let's assume the being can change its mind. It knows it will lift the stone, but tomorrow it exercises its free will and chooses not to lift the stone. This action instantly invalidates its prior knowledge. That knowledge was not knowledge at all. It was just an incredibly accurate prediction that turned out to be wrong. Therefore, the being is not omniscient. The paradox is this: freedom seems to require the ability to invalidate the future, while omniscience requires that the future be fixed and knowable. The two concepts appear to be mutually exclusive. This isn't just about the being's own actions. What about the universe itself? Quantum mechanics, for example, suggests that some events are fundamentally random, indeterminate. Can an omniscient being know the outcome of a truly random event? If it can, then the event was never truly random, and the universe is deterministic. If it cannot, then its knowledge is incomplete, and it is not omniscient. Philosophers and theologians have proposed several escapes. One is the foreknowledge is not causation argument. This analogy states that if you watch a recording of a football game, your knowledge of the outcome doesn't cause the players to act. However, this analogy fails because the omniscient being is not a passive observer of the game. It is an agent on the field. Its own choices are part of the recording. It is simultaneously watching and creating. Another solution is to simply redefine omniscience. This argument states that omniscience means knowing all knowable things, and the future choices of a free agent are simply not knowable until they happen. This solves the paradox, but it does so by surrendering. It essentially claims the being is all-knowing, except for the things it doesn't know. A more complex solution involves changing our concept of time. We imagine time as flowing, a now that moves from past to future. But what if time is a block? What if the past, present, and future all exist simultaneously, and our consciousness just experiences it slice by slice? In this block universe model, an omniscient being could exist outside of time and see the entire fixed tapestry. Its knowledge of its own future action doesn't cause it, nor does it prevent its freedom. The free choice is a real event that happens at its specific point in time, and the being's knowledge is just its ability to perceive that fixed, unchanging fact. This resolves the paradox, but only by forcing us to accept that our entire experience of time, choice, and an open future is a profound illusion. 15. The observer's bet. Why you can never experience your own death. This thought experiment combines the strangest, most counterintuitive theory in physics with our most personal, intimate terror, our own non-existence. The theory is the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. It suggests that every time a quantum event occurs, which is happening constantly, everywhere, the universe splits. Every possible outcome does happen, just in a separate, parallel branch of reality. This isn't a metaphor. It's a literal interpretation. You don't just choose one path. You live all of them in separate, branching timelines. Now, we apply this to a human life. We adapt the famous Schrödinger's cat experiment, but we replace the cat with you. You are in a box with a device linked to a single quantum event. If the particle spins up, you live. If it spins down, a gun fires and you die. From an outside observer's perspective, this is a simple, grim 50-50 probability. If they run the experiment 10 times, they are overwhelmingly likely to be cleaning up a corpse. That is their reality. But what do you experience? The moment the machine is turned on, the universe splits. In one branch, you are dead. Your consciousness, your subjective experience, your stream of thought, it ends. It is a game over screen you never get to see. But in the other branch, You are alive. Your consciousness, by definition, continues. You run the experiment a second time. The universe splits again. One you dies. The other lives. The other lives. Your awareness, this unbroken stream of you-ness, can only follow the path of survival. This is the chilling concept of quantum immortality. It is not a promise that your body is immortal. It is a logical argument that your consciousness can only ever experience the timeline in which it continues to exist. To an outside observer, you are playing Russian roulette, and your odds of survival plummet to near zero with every pull of the trigger. They will almost certainly watch you die. But from your perspective, you will keep pulling the trigger, and the chamber will always be empty. You will appear, to yourself, to be invincible. You will beat 1 in a million odds, then 1 in a billion, then 1 in a trillion. You will be forced to conclude either that you are a god, or that the theory is true. This, of course, is purely a thought experiment. It is a ghost story told with the language of physics, designed to explore the unsettling implications of the many worlds theory. It challenges our very definition of self. If this is true, your consciousness is not a single thing, but a branching river. And death is not an end you experience, but simply a branch of that river that you, the surviving observer, never get to see. It suggests that the you reading this is, by definition, the one who has survived every single random, life or death quantum event that has ever happened. 16. The habit loop. Why you can't logically trust that the sun will rise tomorrow. This is one of the most fundamental and unsettling problems in all of philosophy. It's a direct attack on the most basic tool we use to navigate the world. This tool is induction, the process of observing patterns from the past and projecting them onto the future. It's the engine of all prediction. You are using it right now. You trust that the floor will support you, that gravity will hold you down, and that the sun will rise tomorrow. Why? Because these things have always happened before. The problem of induction, famously articulated by philosopher David Hume, is that this line of reasoning is a complete logical fallacy. It is based on habit, not reason. Hume's point is devastatingly simple. You have no logical proof that the future will resemble the past. Just because the sun has risen every day of your life, it does not logically guarantee it will rise tomorrow. To believe that, you must make one giant, unprovable assumption: the uniformity of nature. You are betting your life that the fundamental laws of the universe will be the same tomorrow as they were today. This is not logic. It is an act of faith. Consider the classic example of the turkey. Every single day, the farmer comes and feeds the turkey. The turkey, an excellent inductive reasoner, observes this pattern. Its confidence grows. For 1,000 days, the evidence is perfect. Farmer equals food. On day 1001, the day before Thanksgiving, the turkey's proof catastrophically fails. The turkey's entire model of reality was correct, until the one day it wasn't. We are all the turkey. We are just living in a world where Thanksgiving hasn't arrived yet. This isn't just a philosophical game. Science, our greatest tool for understanding the universe, is built entirely on this shaky foundation. When scientists observe a phenomenon and formulate a law, they are making a massive inductive leap. They are betting that the pattern they observed will hold true everywhere and for all time. So far, this bet has paid off. But it is not a logical certainty. Newton's laws of motion were considered absolute truth for centuries, until Einstein's theory of relativity proved they were just an approximation. Science is not proven. It is simply the best set of patterns we've found so far. We have another form of reasoning, deduction, which is logically certain. Deduction starts with a general rule and applies it. For example, all humans are mortal. Premise 1. Socrates is a human. Premise 2. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. Conclusion. This is a perfect, airtight proof. But notice its great limitation. Deduction doesn't teach you anything new about the world. It only reveals what is already hidden inside the premises. Induction is the opposite. It's messy, imperfect, and logically flawed, but it's the only tool we have for learning new things from experience. We are trapped. We cannot function without induction. Try to live your life without it. You can't. You must trust the patterns. You must trust the pattern. This is why philosopher Karl Popper suggested a different approach: falsifiability. He argued that science shouldn't try to prove things true, which is impossible via induction. Instead, it should aggressively try to disprove things. Instead of finding 1,000 white swans to prove all swans are white, you should hunt for the one black swan that proves the theory false. Ultimately, the problem of induction teaches us a profound humility. It forces us to accept that our entire sense of a predictable, orderly universe is not a logical conclusion. It is a psychological habit, a necessary assumption that we all, as a species, have agreed not to question so that we can get through the day. We are all just turkeys, betting that tomorrow will be another ordinary day. 17. The replication trap. Why a perfect copy isn't you. This thought experiment, posed by philosopher Derek Parfit, is a direct assault on our most cherished belief, that we are a single, continuous self. It uses a hypothetical technology to ask a devastating question. If you were perfectly copied and your original body was destroyed, would you survive? Imagine a machine called a teleporter. It doesn't transport you, it replicates you. It scans every atom of your body, recording your brain structure, your memories, your personality, your entire being. It then vaporizes your original body here on Earth. This information is beamed to Mars, where a receiver, using new atoms, reconstructs a perfect identical copy of you. This you on Mars wakes up, remembers stepping into the machine, and feels perfectly continuous. Is this person you, or did you just die? The answer tears our definition of identity in two. If you believe in the psychological view, then yes, this is you. Your identity is just a pattern of information. As long as your memories and consciousness continue, the vessel doesn't matter. This is appealing, as it aligns with how we already experience life. After all, the atoms in your body are constantly being replaced. The you of today is not physically the you of 10 years ago. The teleporter in this view just speeds up the natural process, but our intuition screams that this is wrong. This is the body view. It argues that you are this specific, physically continuous object. The moment the machine destroys your body on Earth, you cease to exist. The thing on Mars is just a clone, a perfect copy that thinks it's you. It has your memories, but it is a new, separate person who began its life the moment it was built. From this perspective, using the teleporter is not travel. It is suicide and the creation of an orphan. This is where Parfit twists the knife. He introduces a malfunction. The machine scans you and creates the perfect copy on Mars, but it fails to destroy the original you on Earth. Now there are two of you. One on Earth, one on Mars. One on Mars. Both are 100% physically and psychologically identical up to the moment of scanning. Both have a perfect claim to your memories, your name, your family. Which one is the real you? The body view would say the original on Earth is you, and the Mars copy is the replica. The psychological view collapses because psychological continuity has forked. Both of them are you, which is impossible. This forces Parfit's horrifying conclusion. The very concept of a single continuous self is a fiction. It's a convenient illusion. He argues that identity is not what matters. What really matters is psychological continuation. In the malfunction scenario, you have survived as two people. This shatters our belief that identity is a one-to-one relationship. This isn't science fiction. It's a clinical tool to probe our assumptions. It forces us to ask what we really value. Do we value our physical body, or just the story of our life? And if that story could be copied, would we care if the original book was burned? The teleporter suggests that our sense of self is far more fragile than we think. 18. The shifting target. How to never lose an argument. In any rational discussion, there is a fundamental rule. If you make a claim, you are responsible for proving it. This is the burden of proof. It is the logical and social contract that prevents people from making wild assertions without consequence. But this very rule, designed to uphold truth, can be expertly twisted into a powerful weapon. It can be used as an unwinnable trap, a cognitive snare designed not to find truth, but to paralyze your opponent in an endless loop of justification. This is the paradox of the burden of proof. Here is how the trap is set. The challenger, rather than engaging with the substance of a claim, simply attacks the sufficiency of the evidence. They shift the goalposts. You provide a fact. They say it's not enough. You provide an expert. They say the expert is biased. You provide a study. They say the study is flawed. They are not debating you. They are simply raising the price of admission, over and over, until the standard of proof becomes impossibly high. No amount of evidence is ever enough. This tactic drains the claimant of energy and makes them appear weak, as if they are failing to prove their point, when in reality, the point is a constantly moving target. This is often disguised with the noble-sounding phrase, "Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence." While a valuable principle in science, in the hands of a manipulator, it's a perfect weapon. They can define your claim as extraordinary, and their own skepticism as the default, ordinary position, all without lifting a finger to provide any counter-evidence. This tactic avoids the argument entirely by making the barrier to entry insurmountable. The paradox becomes an impenetrable fortress when dealing with negative claims. How do you prove something does not exist? How could you definitively prove that unicorns are not real? To do so, you would have to have searched the entire universe simultaneously, which is impossible. Logically, the burden must fall on the person making the positive claim. Unicorns exist. But in a real-world argument, a skilled manipulator will simply shift the burden, demanding, "Prove to me they don't exist." They hand you an impossible task, and your failure to complete it is then held up as proof of their own position. This isn't just philosophy. It's a core mechanic of our society. In a legal system, the prosecution has the burden to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. This is a high bar designed to protect the innocent. But it also creates a paradox. A defense attorney's primary job is not to prove innocence, but to attack the prosecution's case until it falls just short of that burden. This can lead to the paradoxical situation where obvious guilt cannot be legally proven. In online debates, this is a crude, common tactic. A person makes an absurd claim, and when challenged, simply retorts, "Prove me wrong," or "Do your own research." This is a cynical reversal of the burden, forcing the critic to do the work the claimant refuses to do. To escape this trap, you must refuse to play. You must balance skepticism with fairness. The required evidence must be calibrated to the claim. An everyday assertion, "It rained yesterday," requires little proof. A life-altering one, "I saw a UFO," requires much more. The paradox teaches us to be wary of our own biases. Are we demanding more proof because the evidence is truly weak, or because it challenges a belief we are desperate to protect? The only way to have a productive discussion is to agree on the rules before you play, and to define, together, what enough proof actually looks like. 19. The blissful amnesia. Would you erase your pain? You are offered a single pill, a perfect medical solution. It has no physical side effects, and it will not damage your brain. Its only function is to find, target, and completely erase one specific, painful memory. The betrayal that broke you, the failure that haunts you, the loss that defines your grief. It can be gone, forever. You would be left with a clean slate, a perfect, scar-free mind. The question is not if you would, but what you would become if you did. Would this act make you happier, or would it be an act of profound self-mutilation, erasing an essential part of who you are? The appeal is almost overwhelming. For anyone truly haunted by their past, for someone trapped in the relentless loop of post-traumatic stress, this pill represents liberation. It is a promise to silence the internal echoes of your worst moments. Imagine no longer flinching at a sound that reminds you of an accident, or being able to trust again after a deep betrayal. It offers a simple, clinical, and total escape. Life could be lighter. Life could perhaps finally feel normal. But this is the trap. We are conditioned to see pain as the enemy, as a flaw in the system to be corrected. We forget the function of pain. It is a teacher. It is the fire that forges us. When you erase the memory of a devastating failure, you do not just erase the pain. You erase the lesson. You erase the resilience you built, the empathy you gained, and the grit you earned by surviving it. You are, in effect, electing to become a weaker, less developed version of yourself. Our scars are not just damage. They are proof of our history and our strength. This leads to the core of the problem: identity. You are not the person you were before the pain. Your identity is a narrative, a continuous story built from all your experiences, good and bad. The painful chapters are often the most critical plot points. They are the why behind your who. Erasing a bad memory doesn't just remove a scene. It makes the entire rest of the story incoherent. You may no longer remember the betrayal, but you also no longer understand why you were so cautious about trust. You are an amnesiac, a stranger to your own past, doomed to repeat the very mistakes you paid such a high price to learn from. Where would this stop? If you can erase one memory, why not all of them? Why not erase every uncomfortable argument, every moment of guilt, every instance of regret? The logical end of this path is not a happy person, but an empty one, a smiling, placid shell with no history, no depth, and no wisdom. It would change society. Accountability could be replaced with amnesia. Why work through a conflict when you can simply erase it? We would lose the very foundation of human connection, which is not built on perfection, but on shared vulnerability and the hard work of forgiveness. This dilemma forces us to define happiness itself. Is happiness truly the absence of pain? Or is that merely comfort? Perhaps true happiness, or a deeper fulfillment, is not about having a clean record, but about the integration of our entire lives. It is the ability to look at our own flawed, painful, and beautiful history, and accept all of it. The pill offers a sterile peace. The human choice is to carry the pain, to let it shape us, and to build a life despite it, and ultimately, because of it. 20. The analysis paralysis. How overthinking traps you in a loop. It is a uniquely modern form of paralysis. You are standing in front of a wall of options, a simple vending machine, and you are frozen. You are hungry, but you are trapped, mentally simulating and re-simulating the outcome of every choice. This snack is healthier, but that one is tastier. This one is cheaper, but that one is bigger. You are caught in a mental tug-of-war, terrified of the regret that will follow a suboptimal choice. This is the decision-making loop, a cognitive trap where the simple act of choosing becomes a source of profound anxiety and inaction. This loop doesn't just happen with snacks, it scales to the most important moments of our lives. A young adult trying to choose a career path, a stable, respectable job versus a creative, uncertain passion, can get caught in this loop for years. They research, they ask for advice, they make pros and cons lists, and every new piece of information only adds another layer of complexity. They are not deciding. They are stuck in the process of deciding. And the time, energy, and opportunity costs are devastating. In high-stakes environments, this loop is fatal. A soldier in combat or a firefighter in a burning building cannot afford to overthink. They are trained to make rapid, good enough decisions based on the immediate information they have. They understand that hesitation, driven by a desire for the perfect choice, is a catastrophic failure. Indecision is itself a decision. It is the choice to fail by default. At its core, the decision-making loop is not a problem of logic. It is a problem of fear. We are terrified of failure. We are terrified of the unknown. And most of all, we are terrified of regret. That phantom feeling that a different choice would have led to a better outcome. To avoid this pain, we desperately seek certainty. We hunt for the one, single, correct answer, a guarantee that our choice will be perfect. But life rarely, if ever, provides such certainty. Most decisions are not about right or wrong, but about managing trade-offs. This psychological flaw is weaponized by modern life. We are drowning in choice overload. The sheer abundance of options, whether in online shopping, streaming platforms, or career paths, overwhelms our ability to process. The more choices we have, the harder it becomes to commit to one, and the less satisfied we feel with the choice we finally make. Breaking this loop requires a radical shift in mindset. You must accept that there is no perfect choice. Every path involves some risk. Instead of aiming for perfection, aim for progress. Set clear, hard criteria for your decision, and most importantly, set a time limit. Give yourself 5 minutes to choose the snack, or a week to research the job. And when the time is up, you must act. The most powerful tool is to reframe the decision. Stop viewing choices as permanent, life-defining moments. See them as experiments. You are not choosing a career for life. You are trying a job to see if it fits. If it doesn't, you can adjust. This lowers the stakes, reduces the fear, and gives you permission to move. Action is the only thing that breaks the loop. Thinking more does not. You must be willing to make a choice, live with the outcome, and trust in your ability to adapt, rather than in your ability to predict the future perfectly. 21. The kindness trap. When all good becomes an excuse for evil. Omnibenevolence. The idea that a deity is perfectly and infinitely good is one of the most comforting concepts in theology. It's the anchor for faith, the belief in an ultimate, loving consciousness. But this concept does not exist in a vacuum. It immediately collides with the most unavoidable fact of human existence: suffering. This collision creates a profound logical conflict. If a deity is all good, it must desire to end suffering. But if it is also all-powerful, it could end suffering. The fact that suffering is rampant and inescapable leads to a harsh conclusion. Either the deity is not all good, or it is not all-powerful. This is the core of the omnibenevolence conflict. On one hand, an all-good being would presumably want a world free of pain. On the other, our world is filled with it, from the cruelty of natural disasters to the horrors of human-made atrocities. This isn't a minor contradiction. It's a fundamental paradox. The classic defense is the appeal to free will. The argument states that for humans to be capable of genuine love and virtue, they must be free. True freedom, however, must include the freedom to choose evil. A world without this choice would be a world of robots, incapable of meaningful action. Therefore, the evil that humans commit is the necessary, tragic price for the possibility of goodness. This explanation, however, is a failed attempt. Even if we accept this flawed logic for human-caused suffering, it does absolutely nothing to explain natural evil. What free will did an earthquake exercise when it killed thousands? What choice did a virus make when it devastated a population? These forms of suffering are completely unrelated to human action. Why would a benevolent creator design a world where children are destined to die of agonizing diseases or be swept away by floods? Here, the defense shifts to a vaguer, more desperate argument: the greater good. This perspective, also known as the mysterious ways defense, claims that we humans are simply too limited to understand the divine plan. It suggests that suffering, while appearing tragic to us, might serve a greater purpose we cannot see. Perhaps these challenges are meant to test us or to build character. This argument is a logical and moral failure. It is an appeal to ignorance. If we cannot understand the reasons for suffering, how can we possibly claim to understand that the deity is benevolent? If a being's goodness is so alien that it includes what we experience as pure, senseless horror, then the word good has lost all meaning. It becomes a hollow, empty term, completely detached from human morality. This defense asks us to trust in a goodness that is functionally indistinguishable from cruelty. This is the ultimate bind. The concept of omnibenevolence, when confronted by reality, forces us into a corner. Either God is good, but not powerful, or powerful, but not good. The conflict highlights the profound difficulty of reconciling an abstract ideal of perfect love with the brutal, complex, and often unfair reality of the world we actually live in. 22. The perceptual trap. Why you can't see what's really there. What do you see? It's the simplest question, but it's also the most loaded. You are looking at a simple line drawing. A moment ago, it was a duck. Now, you tilt your head, and it's a rabbit. You are looking at the famous duck-rabbit problem, a simple drawing that serves as a powerful tool for dismantling our belief in objective reality. The image is an ambiguous figure. Your brain can interpret it in two distinct ways, but the truly unsettling part is that you cannot see both at the same time. You are forced to flip between one reality and the other. Why? Because this isn't a problem of vision. It's a problem of perception. The philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein used this exact puzzle to demonstrate a profound truth. Seeing is not a passive act of recording, like a camera. It is an active process of interpretation. Your brain doesn't just see the lines, it decides what they mean. And that decision-making process is happening so fast, you don't even know it's happening. This decision is not made in a vacuum. It is heavily influenced by your internal state and the external context. If you see this image around Easter, you are far more likely to see a rabbit first. If you're in a park by a pond, you'll probably see a duck. The context primes your brain to choose one interpretation over the other. What you see is not objective truth. It's a construction, a story your mind tells itself based on prior assumptions and expectations. This is not just a visual trick. It is a fundamental metaphor for how we navigate the world. Think about a real-life ambiguous event. Someone cuts you off in traffic. Your first interpretation, your duck view, is that the driver is a rude, aggressive person. But what if there is a rabbit view? What if they are rushing to a hospital? The objective event, the car cutting you off, doesn't change, but your interpretation of it, your perception of its meaning, changes everything. This is the root of almost all human disagreement. Two people look at the exact same set of facts, the same data, the same event, the same words, and they see two completely different things. One sees a duck, the other sees a rabbit. They are both 100% convinced that their perception is reality. They are both wrong. Their perception is an interpretation. Neither is objective, and neither is complete. The duck-rabbit problem is a clinical, humbling reminder. It proves that your brain is not a window onto the world. It is a biased storyteller. It actively constructs your reality based on a lifetime of programming. It forces you to ask a terrifying question. If my perception is this easily manipulated by a simple line drawing, how much of my reality am I just making up? It teaches you to hold your own certainties with a little more suspicion, and to accept that another person's rabbit is just as real to them as your duck is to you. 23. The eternal loop. Why your choices are an illusion. We are programmed to believe in a line. We call it time. We imagine our lives as a narrative, a story that moves from a beginning to an end. This belief in progress, in a future, is the fundamental assumption that makes our choices feel meaningful. But what if this line is an illusion? What if time is not a line, but a cage? This is the circular time paradox, the horrifying idea that time is an endless, repeating loop, and the end is just the beginning in disguise. This concept is not new. Many ancient cultures, like the Mayans and Hindus, viewed time as cyclical, a great wheel of creation and destruction. But it was philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche who framed this as a profound, personal psychological test. The eternal recurrence. He asks you to imagine that your entire life, with every single detail, will repeat again and again, forever. Not just the good parts, every mistake, every moment of weakness, every awkward silence, every profound regret. You are destined to relive it all, exactly as it happened, an infinite number of times. This single idea shatters our sense of self. Suddenly, free will becomes a cruel joke. If the loop is fixed, then every choice you think you are making is a pre-programmed action. You are not a person. You are an actor, reading from a script you have already read 1,000,000,000 times before, but are cursed to forget. Your sense of making a decision is just the system rebooting, the loop playing out its inevitable, unchangeable course. This paradox completely breaks the concept of cause and effect. In a linear world, a cause is B. But in a loop, what comes first? This leads to the bootstrap paradox, a situation where an object or idea has no origin. Imagine a time traveler who is given a blueprint for a time machine, which he then uses to build the machine, only to grow old and give the blueprint to his younger self. Where did the blueprint come from? It has no creator. It is a ghost, existing only because of the loop itself. This isn't just a puzzle. It's a model for a world where our thoughts, our ideas, and our very selves may have no grounding, no authentic origin, but are just self-sustaining echoes. And this is not just a philosophical nightmare. Modern physics does not rule it out. While our intuition is linear, Einstein's theory of general relativity allows for the possibility of closed time-like curves, paths through spacetime that, theoretically, loop back on themselves. Some cosmological models even propose a universe that cycles through endless big bangs and big crunches, an eternal cosmic reset. This concept haunts our subconscious. We feel it in the strange, unsettling jolt of déjà vu, that momentary terrifying sensation that we have lived this exact moment before. Perhaps we have. The circular time paradox is the ultimate trap. It suggests that our lives are not a journey forward, but a fixed, inescapable orbit. The only question it leaves us is this: if you knew you had to live this exact day, this exact moment, over and over for eternity, could you still find a way to call it good? 24. The preference trap. Why your comfort zone is a cage. What is freedom? We are conditioned to believe it is the ability to choose what we want. But this is a profound misunderstanding. The preference paradox reveals a deeply unsettling truth. By always making what seems to be the most rational or optimal choice, we may, in fact, be systematically destroying our own freedom. This is because following our preferences is often just an illusion of choice, a pre-programmed path that traps us in a predictable and ever-narrowing world. Imagine you are faced with two doors. The first door leads to a room guaranteed to be filled with your favorite food, your favorite music, and your most comfortable furniture. The second door is an unknown. It leads to a completely random experience that could be better, worse, or simply different. The rational choice is obvious. You pick the first door to maximize your happiness. But what happens when you make this rational choice every single day? You become a prisoner. You have built a cage for yourself, a comfort zone from which you can never escape. You have lost the ability to explore the unknown, and your preferences have become your master. The paradox deepens when you question where your preferences came from. We believe our tastes are unique, a core part of our identity. This is a fiction, Our preferences are overwhelmingly not our own. They are programmed into us by our culture, our upbringing, our environment, and our habits. You prefer a certain food because it was what your family ate. You prefer a certain style of music because it was popular when you were a teenager. Your choices feel free, but they are often just the echoes of your past conditioning. This process is now on hyperdrive. Modern technology, especially algorithms, has perfected the art of trapping us. Your streaming service doesn't just suggest movies, it builds a feedback loop. It analyzes your past preferences and feeds you more of the same, ensuring you never encounter a film that might challenge you, or a song that might genuinely expand your taste. This is not a service. It is the construction of a bubble. You are not being served. You are being defined, optimized, and limited. This creates a terrifying tension between rationality and freedom. Rationality tells us to optimize, to always make the best choice based on what we already know. But true freedom is not about optimization. It is about agency. It is the ability to make a choice that is not logical, to act spontaneously, to embrace the unknown. It is the ability to choose the second door just to see what happens. This is why we instinctively recoil from the experience machine thought experiment, which offers a simulated perfect life. We reject it not because it wouldn't feel good, but because it wouldn't be real. We instinctively know that a life without challenge, without spontaneity, and without the possibility of failure is not a life at all. We value the freedom to grow beyond our current preferences, and that growth can only happen by colliding with the unexpected. The preference paradox is a warning. If you always follow the map of what you like, your world will become smaller and smaller until it is only one room. True freedom is not just the right to choose what you want. It is the courage to choose what you don't yet know, to step outside the bubble, and to retain the capacity to surprise yourself. 25. The XYZ Impostor. Why your words mean more than you think. We instinctively believe that our thoughts define our words. When you think of water, you imagine a clear, drinkable, life-sustaining liquid. This is the internal meaning, the in-your-head definition. But the philosopher Hilary Putnam proposed a thought experiment so powerful, it proved that meanings ain't in the head. It suggests that the words we use are anchored to the external physical world in ways we don't even realize. This is the twin Earth thought experiment. Imagine a planet, twin Earth, that is a perfect atom-for-atom copy of our own. It has the same geography, the same people, the same history. There is only one single difference. On twin Earth, the substance that looks, tastes, and feels exactly like our water is not H2O. It is a different chemical compound, which we'll call XYZ. Now, let's rewind to the year 1750, long before modern chemistry. On Earth, a person named Oscar points to a lake and says, "This is water." On twin Earth, his identical twin, twin Oscar, points to his own lake and also says, "This is water." Both men have the exact same thoughts, beliefs, and sensations about the liquid. To them, the word means the same thing. Putnam's brilliant argument is that they are wrong. He argues that when Oscar on Earth says water, his word is already pointing to or referring to H2O, even if he doesn't know the term H2O. When twin Oscar says water, his word is, and always was, referring to XYZ. The meaning of their words was never the same, because the physical reality they were pointing at was different. This proves that meaning is not just a psychological state. It is a two-part system. One part is in your head, the concept, and the other part is out there in the world, the actual stuff. This external component is what anchors our language to reality. This has profound implications. If you were an astronaut from Earth and you landed on twin Earth, you might at first drink their water and be fine. But as soon as your scientific instruments revealed it was XYZ, you would conclude, this isn't water. It's some other substance that just looks like it. This action proves that your definition of water was never just clear, drinkable liquid. It was the stuff on Earth we call water, which, as science later discovered, happens to be H2O. The Twin Earth experiment is a clinical demonstration that our minds are not self-contained. Our language is tethered to the world. It shows that we can be using a word correctly our entire lives, pointing at the right stuff, without ever fully knowing what that stuff is. The meaning of your words is not just what you think you mean. It is bound to the hidden physical structure of reality itself. 26. The happiness trap. Why chasing joy will only make you miserable. This is one of the most practical and painful paradoxes of human existence. It's a simple, undeniable truth. The more desperately and directly you pursue happiness, the more relentlessly it will flee from you. This is the paradox of hedonism. It's a cognitive trap that ensures the only way to lose the game is to try to win. We are conditioned to believe happiness is a goal, a thing to be acquired, a state to be achieved. This is a fundamental error. Happiness is not a goal. It is a byproduct. It is the smoke that rises from a fire, not the fuel you can grab. Think about laughter. You cannot decide to find something funny. You cannot force a genuine laugh. It is a spontaneous response to an external stimulus. Happiness operates in the exact same way. It is an emotional echo, a side effect of other, more meaningful actions. The moment you turn your focus onto happiness itself, the moment you chase it, you become a self-conscious auditor of your own feelings. You are constantly polling yourself. Am I happy now? Is this making me happy? This very act of obsessive self-monitoring is the antithesis of joy. It is a form of anxiety, and it kills the experience on arrival. The direct pursuit of pleasure leads to a shallow, unsatisfying life because it is a race against hedonic adaptation. The first bite of a wonderful dessert is bliss. The 10th bite is just sugar. The thrill of a new purchase fades, often within hours. This is a treadmill, not a path. We are left chasing the next bigger hit, which in turn provides a diminishing return. This is why studies consistently show that experiences, travel, learning a new skill, or building relationships, create far more lasting happiness than possessions. Experiences build memories and identity. Possessions just accumulate and lose their novelty. So where does happiness actually come from? The paradox shows it emerges not from focusing on the self, but from losing the self in something greater. It is found in meaningful pursuits, not in direct pleasure. Consider relationships. If you enter a friendship or a romance with the goal of making me happy, you will become a selfish, emotional vampire. But if you enter it to connect, to give, and to understand another person, happiness often arises as a natural, unforced consequence. The same applies to a career. The person who chases a job only for the salary and status will feel empty. The person who pursues a career out of a genuine passion or a sense of purpose will often find themselves, almost by accident, deeply fulfilled. This paradox also reframes the role of pain. We assume happiness is the opposite of suffering. But the paradox shows that the deepest, most profound forms of happiness are often born from suffering. The sense of accomplishment from training for and completing a marathon is a joy that simple, idle pleasure can never match. The deep, complex love a parent feels for a child is a bond forged through sleepless nights, sacrifice, and profound effort. By avoiding all difficulty, we are also avoiding all profound joy. The ultimate proof is the psychological state of flow. These are the moments reported as the most positive in human experience. It's when an artist, a musician, a programmer, or an athlete is so completely immersed in their task that they lose all track of time. They are not thinking about being happy. They are not thinking about themselves at all. Their self has disappeared. And in this total absorption, this loss of self-consciousness, they are experiencing the purest form of happiness. This is the final lesson. Happiness is found only by those who are looking for something else. 27. The Theseus Trap. Why you aren't the same person you were yesterday. What makes you? It seems like a simple question. You are the person with your name, your face, your memories. You feel like the same person who went to sleep last night. But this feeling of a stable, continuous self is perhaps the most sophisticated illusion your mind has ever created. When we dissect the concept of identity, it collapses under its own weight, revealing a profound and unsettling paradox. The classic illustration of this problem is the ship of Theseus. Imagine a legendary ship, preserved for generations. As time passes, its wooden planks rot. One by one, each plank is replaced. This process continues for decades until, eventually, not a single piece of the original wood remains. Is this still the ship of Theseus? If you say yes, you are arguing for functional continuity. It has the same design, the same name, and it still floats. The ship is its stuff, and since the original stuff is gone, it is merely a replica, a completely different object. This is the trap. Both answers seem logical, yet they are mutually exclusive. The paradox deepens. What if someone collected all the original, discarded planks and reassembled them? Now you have two ships, the one still sailing, made of new parts, and the one in a museum, made of the original parts. Which one is the real ship of Theseus? The problem becomes a shell game of identity, where the truth depends entirely on which definition you choose to prioritize. This isn't just a philosophical riddle about objects. It's a direct assault on your own identity. You are not a static object. You are a biological process. Your cells are constantly dying and being replaced. Estimates suggest that in 7 to 10 years, nearly every cell in your body will be new. You are, quite literally, not made of the same physical material you were a decade ago. If your identity is tied to your physical body, then the you from 2010 is long gone. Most people's immediate defense is to claim that identity isn't physical. Your memories are not perfect recordings. They are rewritten every time you access them. Your personality shifts with experience. Think about who you were 15 years ago. Do you hold the same political views? The same fears? The same passions? What happens when this psychological chain breaks? If a person suffers from severe amnesia or dementia, are they still the same person? Modern technology makes this even more concrete. If a person loses an arm and replaces it with an advanced prosthetic, we all agree they are the same person. What about 2 arms? A heart? What if, over time, a person slowly replaces every part of their body, even their brain, neuron by neuron, with synthetic components? At what point, if any, do they stop being them? If identity is just a pattern, and that pattern is perfectly transferred to a new substrate, has anything been lost? Or was the original person destroyed and replaced by a perfect mechanical copy? This paradox infects everything we value. Consider a family heirloom, like a grandfather's armchair, passed down for generations. Over a century, it's repaired. A leg is replaced. The fabric is reupholstered. The finish is stripped and redone. Eventually, none of the original material remains. To the family, it is absolutely grandfather's chair. Its identity is not in its wood, but in its meaning and history. To an antique appraiser, it's a worthless replica. This ambiguity applies to abstract concepts as well. Is a band still the same band if all the original members have left? Fans might say yes, as long as the music and spirit remain. Critics would say no. Is a country the same country after a revolution, with new borders, a new government, and a new population? We use the same name, but the entity itself is materially and functionally different. Philosophers have proposed different anchors for identity. Some argue for continuity of process, like a river. A river is never the same water, but we call it the same river because its flow is continuous. This view emphasizes the process over the material. Others root identity in the material itself. They would argue the ship of Theseus ceases to exist the moment its original parts are gone, and a person whose brain is replaced is no longer the same person. This is not just a mental exercise. It has profound practical implications. In medicine, how do we define a person in cases of severe brain injury? If their personality and memories are gone, what decisions should be made about their care? In technology, as artificial intelligence evolves, can a machine develop an identity? If a program learns and changes, at what point does it become something new? The paradox forces us to confront a difficult truth. A stable, unchanging self is an illusion. We are not objects. We are processes. The you of today is not the you of yesterday. We are constantly in flux. So what holds us together? The answer is narrative. Your identity is the story you construct to create a coherent line, connecting your past, present, and future. You are the narrator of your own life, and this story is what you call yourself. Identity is not a thing you have, it is a thing you do. It is a constant, fluid process of creation, and perhaps that very struggle to build a self from changing parts is the only thing that truly defines us.